Welcome to Bouncearound Charleston. I'm Randolph Miller. Coming up in today's show, a new calendar that covers Low Country, African American history and culture. And then we'll have Charleston Fashion Week. And to close out the show, music from Devon Gary. Okay, we're on Bouncearound Charleston. And standing here with me, Brother Sherman E. Pyatt, the owner of Emma's Cast Iron Skillet. Welcome to Bouncearound Charleston.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, a name. Emma's Cast Iron Skillet. Yes. Now, if I heard that name, I would immediately think of a restaurant. But why don't you share with us about the name Emma's Cast Iron Skillet?
The name Emma's Cast Iron Skillet actually came about from a book that I did about 2 years ago, a cookbook. And we got the name actually from my grandmother who taught me how to cook. And so the name itself was also based on the fact that a lot of the things she taught was based out of a cast iron skillet that most houses and most homes had in the Low Country.
A lot of people use cast iron skillets.
Absolutely. So it was basically based on that. And it also focused again on some of the recipes and the stories behind the recipes. And that's how the name actually evolved, which ultimately became the name of our business, Emma's Cast Iron Skillet.
Okay, so now we're dealing with a calendar.
Correct.
And a book that talks about what?
Correct. We're dealing, first of all, with the calendar. This is the first of its kind that focuses on the Low Country and the Gullah culture. So I don't think you'll find a calendar of that nature currently in existence. The images were done, fortunately, with the aid of my son, who is a graphic designer.
Oh, we have the calendar on the screen now.
Right, exactly.
Okay, now when you use the term the Gullah culture,
correct.
What are we talking about?
The Gullah culture basically is defined as a culture that is exclusively covering parts of South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and actually parts of North Carolina, which focuses on language. It focuses on such things as sweetgrass baskets, foodways, the type of foods that we eat, and basically a geographical area from, let's say, Wilmington, North Carolina, as far south as Jacksonville, Florida, along the East Coast, and particularly along this area here. We can associate that with another part of basically West Africa, Sierra Leone and those other areas, which is quite comparable to the language, which is Gullah here, but Creole there, that is spoken, and sometimes particularly foodways, rice being one of the main staples that we will find here.
Okay, so when a person look through this calendar, what can they expect to see?
They will find actually dates of things that happened in Charleston, Beaufort, Savannah. We go back as far as the 1800s on a particular date. Say, for example, today, in 1963, Harvey Gantt was the first African American who was a native Charlestonian, graduated from Burke High School to enroll in Clemson University. We will go back as far as the 1800s to find when the first, let's say, Union Army was formed in Beaufort. We will also find images from those from around the Charleston area, some as far as Jacksonville and the Beaufort area as well.
Okay. Now tell us about the book called The Other Side of the Skillet.
The Other Side of the Skillet actually is a book that is going to be based on a revision of the first book that I did. And what we're focusing on, what I'm focusing on, are recipes that will give you an alternative and a healthy way of eating in the Low Country. Taking away sometimes as we focus maybe on rice constantly, now we can maybe substitute and use brown rice instead, or using something that's called orzo. It's a wheat that looks like a rice. Taking out sometimes some of the way how we would fry things, and maybe we are going to bake them instead. We have a recipe, for example, for oven fried chicken, which again has no oil, but it has a crispiness to it, but it's done in the oven. Sometimes using greens in a different manner, where we would have, for example, it's called a heritage pot, where greens is combined with tomatoes, chicken, or seafood, and you can use that instead. So it's an alternative way to eating in the Low Country. Okay, so now what are some things coming up in the future? Well, what we're looking at right now are a couple of things. We will continue to do the calendars over a series of times. We're also going to be focusing on some children's books. that we're going to basically be developing from a character that soon will be announced in the next year or two. I'm going to be focusing on a novel that will feature and focus basically on a low country tale in the low country area. Of course, names and places will be changed, but you will get an idea because it will focus on the folk culture. It will focus on the mannerisms that existed in the 1940s on through the up through the 60s and 70s.
Okay. Well, Mr. Sherman Pyatt, we thank you for being here today on Bouncearound Charleston.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Emma's Cast Iron Skillet. And for more information, call 843-766-5535 or Facebook, Emma Cast Iron, or Twitter at Emma Cast Iron, or www.gullaculture.net. Did I say that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Coming up next, Charleston Fashion Week, right after this break.